Welcome everyone to the Council of Deans Race Equality session. I'm Aisha Holloway. I'm Professor of Nursing Studies at the University of Edinburgh. I'm a member of the Council of Deans, and I am joined by our illustrious group of guests and colleagues from across the UK. Welcome everyone. As you'll know, this is the first time that the Council of Deans have run Race Equality Month. So your feedback and how you've experienced this and found this would be wonderful. I think Robin is actively working in the background with the chat, so please keep an eye on that. Some house rules. We're going to keep questions till the end in terms of discussion of them and putting them to the panel, but during the course of the 3 sessions, as you have questions or comments or thoughts, please type them into the chat. They will be collated by Robin and colleagues, and they will bring them to the discussion at the final part of the session. Similarly, if you can mute yourselves, it may come up automatically, but if you're not talking, we should all mute, myself included, so that the speakers are able just to focus and concentrate on their presentations. So I will, you should have the details of the speakers, but in terms of order, and we have changed this round a few times because we want it to flow nicely for you all. We will have Chantal, who will introduce herself. Then we'll have Gina. Great to see you, Gina, there, sunshine in the background. And then to finish off the session, we have a double act with Paula and Mary, which will be fantastic. And hopefully the session will flow through in a logical order for you. There may be some overlap. We were just talking before the session started, and we agree, huge topic area, and our speakers have the big challenge of trying to, you know, cover something meaningful in 10 minutes. So this isn't supposed to be in depth in any way, but it's supposed to give us wide coverage, share ideas, and the focus really is on solutions. We've all experienced this in many ways during our careers, but let's see what everyone is doing across the UK. Let's start to create that discussion, be solution focused, and hopefully give you ideas to take forward in your own institutions. Remember, the focus of this is about academia. We're touching on race equality in all manner of aspects of our lives, but for today and this purpose, it's in our workplace where we all are working every day, and with our students who also come from a diverse background. So with no further delay, with the clock on, I'm going to welcome Chantal and take it away.
Thank you very much, Aisha. So first of all, good afternoon, everyone. And thank you very much, Aisha and the Council of Deans for inviting me to be a panel member this afternoon. So the topic of my talk is much broader than perhaps my other colleagues on the panel, as I took my cues from the questions that were raised in the flyer that have been sent out with the webinar advert for today's panel. So I'm just going to kick off with some of those questions that have been posed. So the first one being, what needs to be done to be all prioritized to address the lack of racial diversity. But I wanted to say at the outset that it's worth restating the importance of addressing the lack of racial diversity in academia, and the impact as well. Obviously, most of us on this call today deliver clinical programs in higher educational establishments, and I think it's worth mentioning that during the pandemic we witnessed disproportional morbidity and mortality of ethnic minorities during the pandemic, and that there's been talk around continuous signs of healthcare disparities between ethnic minority groups and white British communities. And we as educators, we have a duty, if you like, or a responsibility to address those shortcomings, either within our curriculum, but at the same time we recognize also the lack of racial diversity within academia. And I think one of the things that struck me was the race disparity report that reported in 27 that found that there were significant racial injustices in all areas of public health, education, employment, housing, and the criminal justice system. So for me, it's really imperative that healthcare education in the first place acknowledges that the importance of a diverse academic workforce that would support, in particular, our ethnic students. And we also know that a sense of belonging and their perceptions of the possibility of pursuing a career in academia is very important. And as a result of that, not having significant role models within our institutions may well impact and impinge on that particular journey. So for me, when I'm looking at that particular question, I'm asking myself as to what should we then be doing in order to support the delivery of our clinical programs in a very diverse manner that would attract certainly individuals from an ethnic background. So I thought perhaps, as Aisha said at the outset, that, let's focus on solutions. I thought it would have been good for us to have a pool of Black academic role models that we could share across all of the institutions in order to present this very visible role that would support and inspire others, to take on the same journey that we have undertaken. And also to have some sort of system that provide a better supportive career advice. And at the same time, we should really be refocusing our minds onto the contents of what we deliver within our curricula to certainly try to embed within those programs a very diverse approach that focuses on the needs of our very diverse communities. And I gave some thought to the idea of, I noted that there were certain institutions who are going down the road of establishing race equality charters, for example. Maybe that's one of the things that we could do. Or even whether higher educational institution would implement a contractual element within the contract in the same way that they've done with NHS England for the workforce race equality standards, for example, which ensures that ethnic staff would have equitable access to staff development and support, etc. So I just think that these are some of the solutions that we might want to give some thought to. But also, I think that each institution should really undertake an audit of what is the picture of their ethnic staff within their own school or faculty that would allow us to be able to put forward a strategy to address the lack of racial diversity within that specific school. I think the other question that was asked was in relation to what can individuals do to address the lack of racial diversity. I think there are certain things as individuals that we can do. We can support, obviously, and mentor either students or staff from a want of a better word, the BAME community. We could give talks to our respective communities and also increase our visibility across the whole of the sector. But I think this is something that a journey that we all have to undertake together. It's not a Black problem. It's an institutional problem. So therefore, we should all work together in order to try to address that concern. I think the third question that was asked was around what can healthcare faculties do in order to address the lack of racial diversity. And again, I think that the starting point should be around producing an audit that looks at what the picture looks like within that particular organization, both from the staff who deliver the programs, but also in terms of whether the programs meets the diversity that it requires in order to for our students to be better informed of the communities that they serve. But we can, and we do have these, and I'm sure Paula and Mary will be talking about this in a little bit more detail. But we could be a little bit more transparent about the way in which we use our criteria in order to hire academics within the institutions. And we could also do a lot of promotional activity in relation to the careers or to the programs that we deliver that brings about a career in the healthcare sector. And developing alongside very strong outreach mechanisms to attract promising racially, ethnically diverse candidates to healthcare leadership careers. I mean, last year, for example, Health Education Improvement Wales, who is our commissioning agent, there were 9 students from Cardiff University that helped Health Education Improvement Wales to design its first internship. And they participated in induction, essential skill, presentation skills, etc. And the outcome of that, they said that it was a great experience for them, and it gave them a really good insight as to what they might want to do in the future in a leadership role. So maybe that's something we could do in the future. So I'm sure that there are lots of other things that Mary and Paula and Gina will be talking about. But from my perspective, when I look at this issue around what can the health and care sector, health and social care sector, regulators or government do in order to help us, if you like, and support us to address the lack of racial diversity, I think in Wales in particular, perhaps the implementation of a workforce race equality standard as part and parcel of the contractual agreement might help us on that particular journey. But I think there are a lot of other things that we should, as a group across the whole of the United Kingdom, be able to influence our government, to support us in that particular journey. And I did notice that the BMA, for example, has just launched its a racism in medicine survey. Perhaps that's something that we could also undertake as well. So just to bring it to conclude, for me in particular, is that I think that from my perspective, I recognize that holding discussions on race and ethnicity can be very difficult. However, it is for us to tackle it. So to do that, we must first accept that there is a problem and that we recognize the need to change our current approach, and if we truly want to be inclusive. And it's only if we all act together that we will be able to bring about some change. Thank you. Thank you, Aisha.
Wonderful, wonderful, fantastic. Wow. I was going to be writing notes and my little hand was scribbling away. Chantal, that was absolutely wonderful. You basically threw it all there and kind of have really given us a huge base from which our other speakers will, I think, tease out some elements, but hugely helpful for us as an audience listening to this, and hugely informative. And I'm just going to pick out a few key things that I've written down, lots of stars there, and hopefully lots of things for everyone to think about. I think what was key was, I mean, the key one for me was, this is not a Black problem. I mean, that was it. That's the headline, and this collaboration and working together. And you mentioned, different reports, different things that we can draw on different colleagues. So the race disparity report, this issue that COVID has really shone a light on this. The race equality charters, and then you gave us a raft of solutions, some which we probably use already in other areas, but also new solutions. So it probably is a mix of both, and this working together, transparency, outreach. You gave us a fantastic example from Wales with these students and the internships, and I mean, it's grassroots up, isn't it? I'm not, I would just, I'm talking about myself here. I've been in academia for a long time. I don't want to say that everyone else has. I know you have, but I'm speaking for myself. And, you know, we all have individual journeys, individual experiences, don't we? And we can all contribute to it, but alongside our other colleagues from non-ethnic backgrounds. And I really am, I mean, interested about the contractual agreement. So I think what you've offered us is possibilities. And, you know, I think starting the conversation of here are some of the solutions, here's some of the learning from other places, how can we take this forward? So I'm going to leave it there. Hopefully some people will be putting questions in the chat, and I am just going to do a little bit of marketing while I'm here because I forgot to mention it at the beginning, but we are on hashtag Race Equality Month and at Council of Deans. So please get on social media, share this conversation, because that's part of the change. We don't want to just be in this room talking to ourselves. We want to out there. We want people to understand Council of Deans has this on their agenda. We are all engaged. We are all interested. We want colleagues to come and be part of that conversation. So please, can you do that while listening. So over to the wonderful Gina, and I see that Gina and I know each other well, and I used to work at Nottingham University. I have this little special place in my heart there, and Gina will be able to introduce herself, but she is going to give us a review of the UK landscape and consider what an anti-racist environment might look like. Really looking forward to this. So the floor is yours, Gina. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ayesha. I'm going to share my screen now. So if you could just bear with me, it should, hopefully I'm going to be able to locate it. It's not actually coming up at my PowerPoint, although I did load it up in advance. Does your technical there? Does your, yeah, I'm not seeing it.
I can see it on your desktop.
Yeah, so can I. It's, oh, here we are. Can you see it now?
No, not yet.
Now?
Yes, wonderful.
You can see it. Brilliant. Okay, that's good.
That's
well, thank you very much, Ayesha, for inviting me this afternoon. I'm absolutely thrilled to be here to talk to you. And as Ayesha said, I'm Emeritus Professor of Holistic and Community Health at the University of Nottingham. I'm also Vice President of the Health Visitors Association. And I put my contact details here. If anybody would like to contact me or have a further discussion, I'm really happy to do that. So what I thought it would be useful to do is to review the UK landscape, because the UK landscape tells us that 1 in 5 nurses, midwives and health visitors are from Black and minority ethnic groups. And yet we have very, very few visible research leaders emerging from BME backgrounds who are nurse, midwives and health visitors. And it recently became apparent that perhaps I'm the sole BME nurse to hold an NIHR grant as a principal investigator. Now, if there are others out there, please do contact me, because we have some new we're starting. I'm currently in discussion with Professor Ruth Endicott, Director of NIHR, and Professor Alison Richardson regarding this huge underrepresentation in terms of nurse research leaders of BME origin. It's something that we really do need to address. However, it's not surprising, because if we look at the information from the Equality Challenge Unit, we can see the profile of professors in the United Kingdom who in their recent data describe themselves as Black, mixed, other, Chinese or Asian. And we see from this information, we have about 92% of the entire professoriate describe themselves as white. And we are talking about a population of 67 million people in the United Kingdom. So when we drill down to look at the statistics, we find these numbers are very, very minuscule. This is another representation. It shows UK professors by ethnic group, and 0.6 are black, 1.2% are mixed, like by myself. These little coloured dots at the bottom represent the non-white populations. So we really do have a huge amount of work to do in relation to diversifying the academic profile. And if we look at the stats in relation to women, we can find that the number of female professors is actually even smaller. There was a slight increase in 2016 to 2018. We're moving in the right direction, but it's still quite small. And as you might expect, most of the professoriate in academia who are from BME backgrounds are located in the clinical sciences. And you can see that we hardly have any individuals at all in disciplines like archaeology or agriculture in those domains. Many of you will be aware of research that was undertaken by Dr. Nicola Rollock in 2019. And Nicola investigated the career experiences of Black female professors. And this is where you can download the full report from. And what she found, unfortunately, was a culture of bullying and stereotyping of Black female professors, finding it much harder to get on, finding it mentally draining. 50% of the participants were vocationally qualified prior to an academic career, meaning they were lawyers, social workers, or nurses. I was actually a participant in this study. Respondents spoke of a culture in which promotion and career advancement lacked transparency, and the individuals experienced explicit and passive bullying, clumsy stereotyping, being introduced at meetings as the student representatives, being mistaken for the janitor. So what Dr. Rollock concluded was that in the light of the institutional statements expressing support for EDI, how that these statements really lack sincerity when one considers the experiences of the respondents in this study. And I think it's worth noting that Nicola's research really predated the pandemic and the Black Lives Matter movement and the murder of George Floyd. And you remember that many institutions did give out institutional statements at that time. But when we actually look at the reality and the data of what's happening in institutions, how can these institutional statements be meaningful? So here is my suggestion. So what do we need to do, or what do we need to prioritize to address the apparent or real lack of ethnic and racial diversity in our academic institutions? So it is my view that we need to create explicitly anti-racist environments. We need to move beyond unconscious bias training, reverse mentoring, and cultural competence into the very issue in which our legislation is framed. And our legislation is framed in relation to racism and discrimination, and this is what we should be tackling in our institutions. So I'm going to focus more on these 5 dimensions because I want to really talk about the 5 ways to create an anti-racist environment. So what we need to do is we need to remove race as a barrier to career success. We need to demonstrate in our academic institutions that we support people like myself and our BME colleagues, and we prioritize anti-racist behaviors and policies. And this should be manifested in every aspect of the employment arena. It should be manifested in recruitment, promotion, and in working practices. It's essential that the commitment to removing race as a barrier to career progression is manifested in every element of our academic workspace. Secondly, we have to let employees be themselves. There is something here that's known as code switching, and this is where individuals such as myself have to adopt different personalities or different identities in order to fit in with colleagues. And I suppose the most obvious one for a Black female academic is often we feel a need to conform to the predominant hairstyle in our institutions. You know, we might feel pressured to have our hair straightened because we feel that perhaps if we come to work with our natural or Afro hairdos, we're not taken seriously. And this is a real issue. As you know, we've had a pandemic, the hairdressers have been closed for 18 months. And I can tell you, if I go to the supermarket with an Afro hairdo, I can guarantee the store detective is going to follow me around. And that's simply because of racial profiling. And the same thing happens in our institutions. People make judgments. So the third thing is we need to, or you need to be, the leaders who are in our academic institutions, work towards being empathetic leaders. And this means you have to educate yourself on how racism manifests in society, how it impacts upon your employees, how it impacts upon your staff. The effect of racism is cumulative over a lifetime. If we listen to Professor Williams, the academic from the US, he talks about biological weathering. And biological weathering means that our allopathic load is increased and that we age more rapidly due to the cumulative effects of racism, because the psychological impacts eventually have a physical manifestation, because it is stressful and impactful on our health to experience these events on a daily basis. The next point is that you need to create spaces for your employees from Black or diverse ethnic backgrounds. By that I mean you have to create space and support for their networks in creating an anti-racist environment. And actually, it's not just about academics, it's about the whole university community, ancillary staff, and our student body as well. So the networks and platforms should be places of state safety where individuals can have open and frank discussions about the issues of race that they face, and creating psychologically safe spaces so that there is a removal of the fear of failure, which might inhibit an individual's ability to achieve success. This is very important and very critical. And I suggest to you that every person in the academic institution needs to educate themselves on racism and what white privilege means and how that is manifested. And there are many, many texts to assist and help individuals out there now. So at this point, if I can quote Professor Nick Beach, who is the VC of Middlesex University, where I have actually done consultancy work, and what Nick would say is that we must accept there is systematic and society-wide racism. If we do not accept that, we cannot move forward. This is a fundamental axis and precept. If we don't accept this, we cannot move forward with the anti-racist agenda. Finally, we must prioritize anti-racism from an organizational level. All policies and procedures must be reviewed in our organizations, making sure that they are viewed through an anti-racist lens. And making sure that decision-making teams include individuals from diverse ethnocultural backgrounds and that their work is credited. We know from the McGregor report that organizations that are more diverse are more successful. We have the evidence from that report. So these are the 5 key messages that I want to share today about attracting more diverse, ethnoculturally diverse academic individuals into our workforce. There are other issues, but I don't have time in the 7 minutes to go into the other issues, but I'm going to mention them briefly because I think they are critically important. The next thing is sponsorship v mentorship. The Leadership Foundation are telling us that rather than mentoring BME individuals, we may need to think about sponsorship. And the Leadership Foundation have produced a sponsorship toolkit. You can download this. And what they say about a sponsor is that, you know, in addition to mentorship, the sponsors pass on knowledge and advice to their mentees and use their seniority and organizational capital to help the individual advance their career. The other issue that I don't have time to go into today is the whole notion of the decolonization of the academia. And reviewing the historical antecedents of where the wealth in our nation arises and what the contribution of colonization and the transatlantic slave trade has been to academic institutions. I would highlight the work of the University of Glasgow. You can go to their site, you can download all the documents that they produce, which acknowledge the contribution of the transatlantic slave trade to the growth of the university. So I'm going to end there because I know we're going to be running out of time. So thank you so much for enabling me to share my perspective today, Aisha. I really appreciate it.
Oh, wonderful, absolutely wonderful, Tina. And a great follow-on from Chantal, who gave us a real broad brush look at what was going on, and you've managed to distill that into something quite useful for us, I think, in these 5 dimensions. I think the words that spring to mind that you talked about, quite powerful words, and actually the wording that you used really, I felt was about action. It was great, explicit, you know, not like we might think about doing something, we have to be explicit. Biological weathering, I know a few people in the chats, I was just having a look, really agreed with that. Places of safety, really hardcore, like this is absolutely how important and serious this is. It's not okay just to have conversations, there has to be places of safety. And this issue that keeps coming up again, the acceptance of society that this is an issue, racism exists, and without that, really the foundations and the work can't ever change, and that cultural change. And just in the end there, organizational capital, bringing that into the mix, so it's structural, it's the environment, it's not just about individuals. Sponsorship, I thought that was a really interesting perspective, and decolonisation in academia, and I know we're doing work around that in Edinburgh. The McGregor report, another document that people might want to have a look at, but thank you so much, Gina. Quite inspiring, and not that you wouldn't be, and fantastic. 10 minutes, well done, nailed it, thank you. Now we are going to move on to our final speakers, Paula and Mary, who are going to talk about a whole institution approach. So maybe it's about taking what Chantal and Gina have talked about, and let's see what the work that Paula and Mary are doing. And they talk about closing our gap. So let's see what they are doing to close their gap. Over to you, Mary and Paula.
Thank you, Aisha, for that introduction. We'll just wait for our slides to come up. Great. So I want us to start by introducing my colleague Mary Mackinder from the University, from Christchurch, Canterbury Christchurch University. She's a senior lecturer, but also the strategic lead for our university on closing our gap. So what we'll be talking about today, is, we can have the next slide, is just as our overview, is our institutional context, the strategic framework that we are using our approach, and the impact and the future. So at our university, we have staff and students from over 80 countries, and we're very much a widening participation university, and we're really proud that 25% of our students are from Black, Asian, mixed heritage or minority ethnic backgrounds. And in comparison, in our region, which is Kent, that compares to 6.3% of that same population are here locally. So we're doing very well. And we've already heard about the sector picture, but we, just want to pull out here, you're 60 times more likely to see a professor who looks like you if you're white and male than if you're Black and female. So next slide. So like many organizations, we are really very much on a journey. We don't have all the answers. We're on a journey to become an anti-racist institution, and therefore we have a whole institution approach, and that focuses on these sort of 4 key areas. Key to all of this, whatever we're doing, is that we develop trust. And you've already mentioned that earlier, that our staff are able to come forward if they experience racism, and that they're listened to and that action is taken. Our EDI training is very much embedded. It's not just a one-off event. It starts with our induction and then is all the way through with not just a mandatory training, but a whole series of really interesting workshops. We make sure that our pedagogy and our curriculum are evidence-based and co-created, really important with our students. And Mary is going to talk about a case study later. And we ensure that we build solidarity and allyship throughout the curriculum. We address the academic pipeline, and we, again, colleagues have already talked about that, but that starts from outreach into colleges and schools. It includes working on how we deliver education and co-create education. It includes decolonizing also our research and so on. And then, of course, working with our staff who are here. And in terms of governance, we're working on the development of our university leadership team. So I've been here at the university for 3 weeks, and I've already taken part in 2 workshops together with the university senior management team that will help us ultimately to become an anti-racist university. And the whole senior leadership team of the whole of the university will now take part in that as well. We also attach huge importance to data, and we have heard a lot of data already today. But if you have data that is robust, then you can hold people to account. So where possible, we will disaggregate the data. So beyond the term BAME, don't like that, but for want of a better word today, and try and do intersectional analysis. And we make that data available to staff so that we have transparency and so that we can use the data to develop, drive, and evaluate different initiatives. So can we have the next slide, Mary? So this slide, I'm not expecting you to be able to read all of this, but this slide shows you this whole institutional approach that we're using that includes our board of governors, our university senior management team, and then our Closing Our Gap strategic lead. So just to give some examples, I don't know if you can see the last box on your slide, which is about HR and organizational development. The videos are, all of our videos are on top of that on my screen. But what we've been working on is the development of a recruitment toolkit, which we're now implementing, that really provides staff with guidance on how to address unconscious bias in the way we do our recruitment processes. We include a standard statement in all of our advertisements that welcome applicants from ethnic minorities and all other underrepresented groups. We try very much to ensure we have diverse panels when we conduct interviews, although we do need to do more work in this area. And we're in the middle of reviewing our job descriptions, so checking that they really speak to inclusivity, to diverse communities. So what is the language that we're using? Are we really communicating our strategic commitments in our job descriptions and in our adverts? And we're also working with our alumni and our students to see how we can encourage them to consider academia as a career. And again, some of that will come out of Mary's presentation in a minute. Obviously, we have a whole range of other things that lots of universities have. So we have an interfaith council, we have a Black and minority ethnic staff network. We've just been celebrating Black History Month and trying not to just celebrate this during October, but also with events throughout the whole of the year. So this sort of gives you a broad overview, and I'm going to hand over to Mary to give you to talk about what we're doing with our Closing Our Gap project with our students. Over to you, Mary.
Thank you, Paola. So a lot of the work that we're doing across the university, like Paola mentioned, is very much whole institutional based. It has to be the entire institution. And so that really leads on to some of the work we're doing around bridging the gap to leadership, which looks particularly at our students that undertake healthcare and social care placements. And so many students on this programme actually spend about 50% of their time on placement. So I think it's not enough for us to say, we'll just look at what's happening within Christchurch. We also have to look at the student experience when they're on placement, because that is a large part of their student journey. But it's also a large part of whether they go on to work in those professions or not. And also whether they decide to become academics. And so through our sort of working with students and consultations with students in the form of focus groups student insight surveys. We've gathered a lot of information around their student voice, their lived experiences. And I think we've had some data presented today from myself, from Paola, but also from Gina. And I think it's really important that behind that data is actually people, and people with real lived experiences, which therefore, and again, that term biological weathering is really understanding how that impacts our students, our members of staff as well. And so we know that a lot of our students do experience racism, microaggressions whilst on placement, and this can actually impact on their attrition rates, impact on whether they decide to stay on that placement, whether they graduate and what they graduate with. And so for us, it's not just about the psychological, it's not just about sort of their experience on placement, it's their experience on learning, it's their far-reaching experiences on their physical well-being as well. And so what we've done is, it's a collaborative project with the University of Brighton and Christchurch that's been funded by Health Education England. We've established a virtual placement coined Bridging the Gap to Leadership. And that is that's been co-created with students from both universities, which really focuses on enhancing the student experience on placement, student outcomes, but also educating ourselves as academics, educating practice educators and the wider healthcare staff as well. So what we have is a set of resources that students can use, but also practice educators can use on to sort of educate themselves on race, privilege, racism, intersectionality, and particularly things like a lot of our students might have like a disability like dyslexia, and that might impact on their state placement experiences as well. And so we have a range of different students on this placement. And so we have students from Black, Asian and ethnic minority backgrounds and mixed heritage backgrounds as well. But we also have white students on this placement as well. And I think it's really important that when we are talking about, and it was mentioned earlier by Chantal, it's not a Black problem. It's not a Black problem. It's not a brown person's problem. It's not a mixed heritage person's problem. It's actually all of our problem. And so therefore it's really important for us to build allyship into this placement as well. Particularly the fact that a lot of our white students will go on to be supervisors and future leaders as well. So it's really important to help build that empathetic approach from the beginning. And that really feeds into some of the work we're also doing on our programme around decolonizing the curriculum, but also really focus on actually how do we decolonize practice, not just within higher education, but also decolonize practice within healthcare as well. And so for us, it was about having this placement in which students worked with us collaboratively across both universities, but with healthcare professions, to really focus on an asset-based approach. Often when we're talking about people from Black, Asian and ethnic minority backgrounds, talking about things like mentoring, it's all have a number of initiatives, it's always taken from a deficit model approach. And so that deficit model approach actually what you're getting is, because you have negative expectations, you often get negative outcomes. And so actually what we need to do is change our mindset, change the way that we think about what people from Black, Asian and ethnic minority backgrounds bring to the society, bring to academia, bring to our healthcare system. And it's about adopting an asset-based approach. And to give you an example of what I mean by and often what we look at as a deficit, we often look at people, particularly students often get told, oh, English is their second language, so that's the problem. But actually, to be able to speak more than one language is an asset. And to be able to do your job in a second language is, to me, is courage, is quite courageous. So we should be using those sort of attributes as an asset. So when we see people as an asset and see the qualities that they bring to our learning communities and our working communities, what we then have is positive expectations and therefore positive outcomes. And so that's the way of affirming individuals and their identity. And that is, you can see that even within the curriculum design. Often you'll see in the curriculum, particularly in healthcare books, it will say things like, look for a red rash. Well, if your skin colour is like mine, you won't see a red rash. And so therefore, I might get misdiagnosed with something. And so again, that then feeds into the wider inequalities within our society as well. So it's just thinking about how do we work with people as an asset, and it's really, really important. The students that we've had 17 students on this placement so far between Brighton and Christchurch, and their experiences has been extremely positive. They've actually, our Black, Asian and ethnic minority students, they've actually said that it's helped them develop their confidence. It's helped them feel like empowered to be able to challenge racism on placement, but also a lot of them now are also thinking about careers in academia following this placement. And then our white students, they've actually said they've realised and developed compassion and empathy, because they never realised that their Black, Asian and ethnic minority counterparts were actually experiencing this level of racism on placements as well. So again, it's really building that collective solidarity. So the impacts of some of the work we've been doing that's been described by myself and Paolo across the institution has been very much, we've started to see a reduction in our attainment gap. So the differences between the degree outcomes of our Black, Asian and ethnic minority students and their white counterparts. We've also seen a reduction in withdrawal rates, and for the first time we've seen that there's no significant difference between withdrawal rates of Black, Asian and ethnic minority students and their white counterparts. We've also seen an increase in reporting of racism, and a lot of places might be scared that they see an increase in reporting of racism, but actually that's a positive thing. It means that actually our students and our members of staff trust in the system that it will work for them as well. And so it's about how then do we take that data and proactively work to tackle issues of racism and develop policies. We've started to see a significant culture shift around allyship and acknowledgement of privilege as well. We've still got a long way to go, but it is a journey, and it's a journey that's going to take a while. But it's a journey that we have to take, and it's about us taking it together. And so where we go from here is really about research, really understanding and collecting the data, and using the data to drive initiatives, and understanding what works and what doesn't work. But it's also ensuring that that data goes beyond sort of the BAME category, and it actually looks at each individual community, but also looks at it intersectionally as well. It's also about how we work to decolonize our curriculum, our practice. And so some of the work we are doing is around mentoring, but it's also about how do we work with our current students to work in academia, how do we encourage them, how do we consider things like outreach. Individuals decide that they want to go into a profession from year 9, so it's not enough to sort of say we'll start working with them when they get to university. It's actually how do we start with working with the wider community. So a lot of it is around collaborative working, and the students must be at the centre of that for us. We've been working with our placement providers, so we've done a lot of work around equality, diversity and inclusion, and embedding best practice. And it's also about building the networks and communities, really think about how do we, again, that whole institutional approach, how do we ensure that we're not getting that biological weathering that really impacts on individuals' mental health and well-being, but also their physical health as well. So it's really about building in cultural competency across the institution. I'm just going to leave you with just a bit of a thought, and it's about, because this is a journey, it's about thinking, are we tourists or are we pilgrims in this journey? And so when I talk about being a tourist or being a pilgrim, as a tourist, we go on holiday, we go and see the nice sights, we go to the nice restaurants, we buy some souvenirs, and we hop back and we come back home, and everything just carries on as normal. But actually, if we really want to change the workforce and really change it so it's meaningful, and it is about being anti-racist, we have to be pilgrims. We have to go on that transformational journey. It's about transforming ourselves, our mindset, our own values and our own beliefs, and therefore transforming our institutions. So it is very much about acknowledging that racism exists, dismantling the assumptions that we have, relearning and rebuilding together. And it's about that collectiveness in that rebuilding. So I think my time is up. Thank you, and please do feel free to email us if you have any further questions.
Fantastic. And I would like to say I was ringing that bell, but I think it's someone else's phone, but it was great timing.
Sorry, I think someone just buzzed. I think it's the postman.
You must have known that you had just nailed it at the end there. That was wonderful.
So apologies.
Well, I mean, dear, this has to be one of the best sessions I've been to in a very long time. I have this sort of physical reaction in my tummy here, just listening to that. Hugely inspiring, Mary and Paula. What fantastic work that is going on there. And I'm not going to give any summing up here because I'll do something at the very end. I've got lots of notes because I really want to hear from our audience who hopefully also found this hugely inspiring and wonderful. So I'm going to go to Robin, our Council of Deans colleague, straight away to see if she can bring some questions to the panel. Robin, are you there? I feel like I'm in Eurovision.
Right. Yes. No, I definitely think everyone agrees that it's been a really great session. And
Wow.
there's lots of messages of thanks and also messages of agreement and support and lots of nodding of heads, I think. I suppose there was a couple of questions and a couple of thoughts. One was around sort of specific things about, firstly, wanting to know a bit more about sponsorship from Gina, and wanting to know a bit more about EDI training and intersectional analysis from Paula. And then the second sort of strand of thought was around the crossover of the academic healthcare workforce with practice, and how it also racism within practice and professional regulators needs to be tackled, and how might academics work with regulators to be more anti-racist and to not just decolonizing the curriculum in academia, but also professional standards, as the academic healthcare workforce sort of straddles both of those. So they were sort of the two areas I thought we might want to touch on.
Okay, so over to the panel. Who would like to pick up on a couple of those issues? Anyone would like to come in? Gina?
Can I just say that I have put the link for the sponsorship kit into the chat box. So it's not something that I've invented, it's the Leadership Foundation developed it, and the link is there. And I just checked to see if the link is live. It is live, and you can download the toolkit from there.
Great. So Robin, we could probably, if afterwards, look through that chat and where people like to put links in and resources, etc. We could probably take that off there and just send it out anyway for people.
Yeah, we'll definitely share this and the recording with everyone. Yeah.
Great. And I mean, I really would like to pick up on that issue around decolonizing practice, because that and the regulators and everyone else out there. So I don't know if somebody wants to just say something about that, about what are the next steps of taking that forward. We're seeing how they're managing it in Canterbury Christchurch, but the NMC one, that I saw someone in the chat talking about the NMC, so our regulators. What are our thoughts at the panel about that? Anybody?
So do you mean, Aisha, the overall approach in relation to addressing the lack of racial diversity amongst academics, or are we talking about something a little bit more specific? I'm trying to scroll through the question to see where that question has cropped up. But I think for me, you know, when I think this is where the Council of Deans, together with the regulatory bodies, can come together in order to put forward a strategy that they would want to see higher educational institutions to adhere to. To some extent, Health Education Improvement Wales, because we've just gone through a recommissioning exercise for all of our clinical programs, and as part and parcel of the tendering exercise, we've had to give a commitment to comply with Health Education Improvement Wales key requirements. And one of those is around diversity, equality and diversity. And so that does require us to put our minds as to how we will educate our students in relation to understanding the community that it serves. But it doesn't address the problem around visibility and the role modeling and some of the things like Gina talked about, for example, sponsorship. I hadn't come across that, but I think that's a brilliant idea. And it's something perhaps both Council of Deans and the regulatory bodies can come together and say, well, this is something that we would like educational institutions to show a commitment to.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Can I just add to that, if that's okay, around the decolonizing
Absolutely.
practice? I think when we think about decolonizing, we just need to really think about what it means. And so often we've seen that we often talk about being equal, let's treat everybody equal. And then we talk about equity, and then we recognize that everybody needs slightly different things. So we give some people a bit more than others. But actually what we want to do, it's not about giving, imagine you've got a fence in front of you and you're trying to look over that fence. And so you give each person a little bit more than the other, just so they can see over that fence. But actually to decolonize is actually to get rid of that fence in the first place. And no, that's where you get liberation and social justice. And so for us, it's very much about looking, because often people, when people talk about decolonizing, particularly like the curriculum, they often talk about things like having reading lists that are more diverse. Well, actually, it's not just the reading list. It's about to truly decolonize, we have to really interrogate, and we have to interrogate our understanding of the world that we're in, how we acquire knowledge, whose knowledge are we acquiring, whose knowledge are we valuing, and why. And so we really have to think about what voices are included in our research, in our practice. And we've seen it even just recently with the oximeters and the sort of issues around that. Who are our participants in our research? Who is leading the research? Who's the principal investigator, and why? Because then what we start to do is, if we start to really interrogate some of those questions about knowledge and whose knowledge we value, who's included, we start to see whose voices are excluded and why are they excluded. And so often we have seen when people say, oh, if we're decolonizing, it means we're taking sort of the white voices out. It's not about taking the white voices out. It's about putting in the voices that have been omitted. So it's about enriching the curriculum. It's about enriching our practice, so that we're all seen, we're all valued, and we're all heard in that. So I just thought I'd sort of add that little bit in there.
No, Mary, that is absolutely, I mean, I was nodding, I could see Gina nodding as well, almost knowingly, because we've probably been in meetings where the conversations where things like that have been said. I'm really mindful of the time, and I don't want it to end, but I guess my plea to the Council of Deans is that I think it's, the speakers have been absolutely wonderful, and congratulations and thank you so much. I mean, so much to think about there, and I think we've unearthed something here, and the Council of Deans must take this forward, what has just been spoken about here, because to have it as a one-off, I mean, I know that's hopefully not what you were thinking about, but really let the voices be heard, and let some of this work, or all of it, be taken forward. I just wanted to pull together the comments in the chat are wonderful and really have resonated with people. So if we take it from the top, from Chantal, you know, not a black problem. Love that. Outreach, transparency, biological weathering, the 5 dimensions from Gina, networks, places and platforms of safety. Absolutely, because we have to hold people through this. This is not easy for many people, let alone us. You know, the people that we engage with, it's a challenge, and again, I'm speaking personally from conversations that I've had with colleagues who find it difficult to have this conversation. And then we moved on to the great work that is going on. I mean, absolutely wonderful. I think I'm going to invite you all up to Edinburgh, because I think you could just bring so much to the Scottish setting as well. Assets, allyship, research and data. And then I think just at the top there, talking about research leadership and the diversity of that, which took us right back to the final point that Mary was making. Who is at the table? Who's undertaking the research? What does that data look like? Who does it represent, and whose voices are missing? Decolonising practice, love to hear more about that. Cultural competency of institutions, data driving initiatives. And I think the best way to end this is Mary's amazingly inspiring, and golly, I think I'm going to use it. I will quote you, Mary, when I use it. Do we want to be tourists or pilgrims? Absolutely wonderful way to end this fantastic session. Thank you to Council of Deans and Robin and our other Council of Dean colleagues who is managing behind the scenes there. And I think we did it. I think we pulled it off, because we were all a bit last minute this morning. It may look like a smooth system here, but we were trying to just make it as good and as informative as possible. I hope we had a great audience, I think about 50 people. I hope you enjoyed it. Huge learning. Have a great day, and I'm probably going to dream about being a pilgrim tonight. Take care.